Welcome to the Junk Rig Association's YouTube channel and to our interview with junk rig sailor Shemaya Laurel. Shemaya Laurel has been sailing in the New England area since childhood. Today she talks about sailing in the Phil Bulger designed Auklet and the Triloboat designed Great Auk.
Eventually, I got a Bulger glasshouse Chabaco built. That's a 20-foot boat with a yawl rig. And originally, it did not have a junk rig. And that's the first junk rig that I had was when we converted that boat. That boat's name is Auklet. That's the one on the blog that you see quite a lot of. And I liked that a lot. I was completely converted from the beginning of that. And so now if you count that we junk rigged the dinghy, there have been 4 junk rig boats. And I've done a lot of coastal sailing, like along the New England coast. I haven't done any crossing oceans, but I have done a good bit of like overnights out to sea a bit. And I love that. And Auklet was very good at that. The boat was designed to be capable and safe for that kind of sailing. And it did well, but it's not super comfortable. Eventually, I started thinking, first I came back from a long season of sailing Auklet and I thought, you know what? I'm done now. That's it. I've done enough sailing. And it took until about March. You know, I'm in the northern hemisphere, and so the winter was going by, and I was looking out at the bay here, and I thought, well, no, you know, I might like to be floating, but I want to be comfortable. I'm over. I'm just over so many different ways to be not comfortable. And it's a variation on one of the Triloboat designs. And it really, the bottom line has been comfort. And I wanted to be more comfortable. And I have some mobility issues, and I wanted it to be easier to move back and forth between the cabin and the deck and to reach all the, you know, control lines. On the Chabaco, it was a little tricky to get forward, which is what you had to do for some of the anchor handling. And if something went wrong with the rig at a bad moment, you had to get up there and do something about it. So this boat is set up so you can walk without any obstructions to everywhere that things happen. And I just love that. You can stand up straight in the cabin. There are no steps between the deck and the cabin. The off of the foredeck is very open, and there are kind of, we call them fish doors. They're like those doors they put on trawlers when they go out fishing for large fish, and they slide the fish up onto the boat. So we put those as the way to get on and off of the boat. And so all the way around, it's been comfortable, but also it's seaworthy, pretty seaworthy. I mean, not cross oceans or anything, but it's worked out much better than I thought. I thought I was going to be staying in bays and have to catch just the perfect weather to go around a point into the next bay and estuary system. and it's done better than that. So that's been nice. And I think he's being cautious, you know, he doesn't want to see somebody get into trouble because of something he put out there. But it was funny because I had the boat built by a boatyard that's right nearby here. And two of the people from there, the owner and the person who's like the service manager, spent a lot of time with me on the design process, the details of the design. He thought the boat was going to do better than that it was going to be more capable. And I thought, oh yeah, well, you know, maybe, but it's okay if it's not. I'm okay with that. And it turns out he was right. Bottom is because we were tired of dealing with bottom paint. And also because I knew, because I live in Maine, where the tidal range is like 12 to 14 feet, typically. And I knew that I wanted the boat to go down on the bottom at low tide. And I did not want to worry about a rock punching a hole in the bottom of the boat when that happens. So for the combination of not having to do bottom paint and feeling more secure, letting the boat go down, that made the copper bottom worthwhile. But the tabernacle was because on Auklet, the mast was just the size people could do it by hand, raising it and lowering it, but it involved pulling it out and laying it down. And going up wasn't bad, but when people were taking that down, it looked scary. I saw people look like that is not really under control there, and somebody could get really hurt, you know, and I didn't like that very much. So that inspired the tabernacle, and used it for that, and it's been really wonderful, both when I've actually done it and also knowing that I could anytime. It's working out. We started with just one, and because it has to be off to the side because of the rudder, it did not seem so ideal because of steering. So then we added to that motor kind of a side wheel so that we could change the angle of the motor, and that helped, but it still felt like it needed two. It needed a motor on each side. And also the electric motor, it's a Torpedo 4.0, which is about equivalent of a 9 horsepower gasoline outboard. And it's, if things are calm, it's fine, it's plenty. But if there's a gusty shifting wind, you know, with good strong gusts, the boat is hard to control because it's got so much windage with the cabin and the top sides. So the second motor has really helped with that. And then the boat has solar panels all over the top of the cabin. And that has been really good. And it kept up with until the fall, when I sailed until November 1st this year. And the sun's getting pretty low at this latitude by then, and the days are a lot shorter. And it was harder to keep up with if I did a lot of motoring. So it would motor for a few hours, but then it would really want to have some time to recharge. Where it had been, I could motor for several hours and have one day of good, not even full sun, and it would fix it right back up again. So, but I didn't, it's set up to be able to plug into shore power. And I did not do that the entire summer. Starting off, it was that thing that, you know, like what Dave Zeiger, the designer, said, well, you know, it's really designed for mild, very mild conditions. And it's kind of interesting that he said that. I think he's saying that out of caution, you know, but the shape of the hull itself below the waterline is the same as, basically the same as the boats that Dave and Anka sail in Southeast Alaska in very demanding conditions. And the only thing that's different is that it has the big cabin and the higher top sides. So going upwind, you can forget about. It's not designed for that, and it doesn't do it hardly at all, except when things are just perfect, you know, very flat water and a little current to help or something. But across the wind and downwind, it sails really well. And so what I spend a lot of time doing is paying attention to what the tide is going to be doing as far as current, and what the wind forecast is, and what the weather systems are that are coming. So, for example, in this area, it'll blow something from the west a lot of the time, and then something will change, and for several days, it'll blow from the east, one way or another, southeast or northeast or something. And this coast is more or less east-west in this part of Maine. So if you time what you're doing with the weather systems, you can go really far with this boat. And so I'm looking at going to southern New England, maybe, if things all go together right, which is, you know, that's about 300 miles from here. I would not do that as offshore overnights. I feel like that's asking more of the boat than I want to do. There's learning experiences. Going down on the mud has been a process of how to judge what's going to be a good spot to do that on. I'm kind of fussy on my comfort thing. I do not want to be at an angle on the mud. You know, I want a spot that's the boat's actually really pretty level. If it's off by, you know, a degree or so, because when you go, if you go down even at mid tide, you're down for 6 hours in whatever spot you came down on. And so it turns out Google Earth has been really helpful for finding where, in what coves and harbors does it have a chance of actually being good. You know, you look at your charts, but it doesn't show the fine-grained kind of things you're looking for. Like, is there an odd little rock that's not a navigation problem when the tide is up, but it's a big problem if the boat came down on it? Or are there little rocks all over the place, which is really bad? You know, you can use multiple anchors to control exactly where the boat comes down, but you need a decent spot. And so the part about avoiding rocks was really obvious to me from the beginning. But what was not obvious to me was, you know how if you look at a mud flat, most of the time there's a drainage channel, or there's a series of drainage channels. And you really do not want to come down so that the boat is on the slope of the drainage channel. Like, speaking from experience, there's a picture of that. I think I sent you that, when the things look a little askew. That's that, and you can see the channel down on the side there. So Google Earth has been especially helpful with that. But also, like, if you anchor with 2 anchors that are kind of like a Bahamian mooring style, then that gives you control for moving the boat backwards or forwards across a particular spot. So you put your anchors down, and then you do soundings all around the outside of the boat. And if you find that somewhere is not what it should be, you know, you don't want to find, oh, off this side is a lot deeper. You know, if it's a foot or 2 feet deeper over here, that's not going to be nice when the boat comes. The lee boards are not too bad. specifically because I said I wanted them to not be too terribly heavy. They're fiberglass over foam, but they're also thinner than they really ought to be, and they have too much flex, really. And so I don't put them all the way down. I let them ride where they want to, like they sink part way naturally. And the upside of that is where I live, there are a lot of lobster traps with buoys and lines. And since I stopped, I used to put the lee boards all the way down, and then you would get hung up on buoys. And it's a problem. It really made problems. So now that doesn't happen. So that's good. And the rudder, it's been kind of interesting. I have an arrangement so it's easy to pull up. I can do that. It's got a line to it and a block. And the size of it you really need to steer the boat. It's a cat boat, really, and it needs the big rudder. But when we did the first sea trial, like we took it out before the boat was done, but the hull was done and the rudder was on. And so the boatyard folks put it in the water and we just went out, for an hour. And in waves from the side, they would really throw the rudder around. And we had a tiller for steering originally. And even for the pretty strong person from the boatyard, he was like, I wouldn't like this. I know you're not going to like this, but also I wouldn't, because of how much he had to do trying to compensate for the waves throwing the rudder around. And that was part of why we put in wheel steering on the boat. I had been considering that anyway, so that I could steer from inside the cabin, but that made that really necessary. And it's worked out well. Its size. I've had 2 boats built at this point. I had Auklet built, and then we did all the completion stuff. And then when I knew I wanted this boat, I was not a happy camper about that I was going to have to go through that again, to tell you the truth, even though it's somebody else building it. But we did a lot of stuff after the basic hull was done. And one of the things about Triloboats is they're designed to be easy to build. They're designed for using, sheets of plywood. There are not a lot of curves. Really, the only curve is where the bow comes up, but it doesn't curve this way. And the stern, the same thing. And it turned out, it was fun. I was just dreading it. I was like, I want this boat, so I will go through this again. And it turned out it was really nice. We had a really good time.
The Junk Rig Association is the place to go for information, advice and assistance about junk rigs, and the Fellowship of Junk Rig Sailors. Find us at www.junkrigassociation.org.